millions in the lottery. My heart was still pounding as I checked the numbers on the screen. I could hardly believe it. My life was about to change forever. But before I could even tell my wife, she walked through the door with a folder tucked under her arm and a glacial look in her eyes. "We need to talk." Those were the last words I wanted to hear that night. I slipped the winning ticket into my pocket, trying to contain my excitement, but reality hit me like a punch to the gut. She wasn't there to celebrate with me. She was there to crush me. "I want a divorce," she said, with the cruel calm of someone who had already planned everything out. When I asked why, the answer was even worse. She was cheating on me, and not just with anyone, with her boss, a married, powerful man who had promised her everything I had never been able to provide. A marriage of years, undone in seconds. I signed the papers with a bitter smile, without saying a single word about the prize hidden in my pocket. While she spoke of freedom and new dreams, all I could think about was how fate had chosen the perfect day to reveal her true colors. But there was one terrifying detail. In Brazil, it doesn't matter when the divorce is finalized. The law guarantees that a spouse is still entitled to half of any lottery prize won during the marriage. Half of my fortune, half of my freedom. And faced with that, I knew I had to act fast. Very fast. My name is Ricardo. I'm 39 years old, and I always believed my marriage was solid. We were childless by choice. I'd had a vasectomy early on, and I thought we had built a comfortable, if simple, life together. But I discovered that simplicity was never enough for her. When my wife, Mariana, asked for a divorce, I couldn't have imagined she was already in another relationship. Worse, with her boss. The messages I found later made it clear. They called me a failure, mediocre, and laughed at me behind my back. What she didn't know was that in the very same week, I had become a millionaire, a prize that could change my entire life. But when I consulted my lawyer, the blow came. Yes, even after the divorce, Brazilian law would grant her half of that money. It was then that I made the most radical decision of my life. I waited for the divorce to be signed, ensuring she left with only her share of what we had built together. And then I began my true plan for revenge. Before I tell you how I managed to turn the tables and disappear with my fortune, let me know in the comments what city or country you're watching from, and subscribe to the channel to become part of our family and not miss the next twists. I met Mariana at a mutual friend's birthday party. She had this expansive way about her that could light up any room, and I, being more reserved, was swept away by her energy. Soon we were together, dreaming of a life for two, and we quickly decided we didn't want children. I had the vasectomy early, convinced our love was enough. Our beginning was marked by simplicity. We lived in a small rented apartment, saving every penny to get something better. By working hard, she and I managed to finance our first car, then our own apartment. They were years of sweat and partnership. I believed there was respect, companionship, and trust. However, things started to change recently. Mariana began spending more time at work, always justifying it with important projects. Even her text messages became shorter, more distant. It wasn't just fatigue, it was something else. And that something else had a name. Her boss, Roberto. I noticed how she spoke of him with an almost exaggerated admiration. She praised the trips he took, the connections he had, the vision for the future that, according to her, I lacked. I'd swallow hard, trying not to make a storm out of what might have just been passing clouds. But something inside me screamed that there was more than just professionalism there. The nights grew cold. We shared a bed, but not intimacy. She would come home late, exhausted, and say she didn't want to talk. I, trying to save what I believed was a solid marriage, remained silent. But silence couldn't prevent the blow that was coming, the divorce request. When she placed the yellow folder on the table, I realized she had come prepared. Inside was a draft agreement drawn up by her lawyer, outlining the separation and division of assets. They weren't official papers yet, but the message was clear. She had already made her decision and was just waiting for my signature to make it official at the notary's office. My calm reaction seemed to unsettle her. She had expected tears, pleas, perhaps a desperate request for her to stay. But I just handed the pen back and said, "If this is what you want, then it's decided." I signed that draft without arguing, not because of its contents, but to show that I wouldn't stoop to her level. Mariana frowned as if she didn't understand. "You're not going to react? You're just going to accept it this easily? After all these years?" Her eyes searched for some sign of pain in me, some proof that she still held power over my life. But I had already understood that her love was gone. I took a deep breath and answered with a calm that disarmed her. "You'd already made your decision when you took another man to your bed. Did you expect me to cry? To beg? No. You didn't even respect the history we had. The least I can do now is not humiliate myself in front of someone who showed me no consideration." She fell silent, swallowing hard, never imagining that my coldness was just the beginning of what was yet to come. The next day, I scheduled an appointment with Dr. Sergio, my trusted lawyer. I handed him the yellow folder with the draft Mariana had brought. He leafed through it calmly, adjusting his glasses, while I tried to appear indifferent. Inside, my stomach was churning. I just wanted to confirm that everything was in order to end this farce once and for all. Division of the apartment, the paid-off car, the joint account balance, nothing out of the ordinary, he said, turning the pages. I sat in silence, waiting to hear the words I most wanted to hear. "Everything is fine." But instead, he closed the folder, looked at me, and asked the question I had been dreading. "Ricardo, is there any other asset not listed here?" My heart hammered against my ribs. I hesitated, but then I let it out. "Last night, I found out I won 12 million reais in the lottery." The lawyer was silent for a few seconds, in disbelief. "Congratulations. But you understand the problem with that, don't you?" I frowned, confused. "Problem? What do you mean?" She had already decided on the divorce before the draw. He sighed deeply. "Ricardo, that's not how it works. What matters is the date of the draw, not the signing of the divorce, nor the day you cash it in. If the ticket was purchased and drawn while you were still married, the prize is considered marital property. Legally, she's entitled to over 50%. The blood in my veins turned to ice. Are you saying that if I claim this prize, half of it will be hers, even though she's already chosen another man?" The lawyer nodded. Exactly. 12 million would become 6. Even if the divorce goes through tomorrow, the law guarantees her a share of that prize because it has belonged to the couple since the moment of the draw. I clenched my fists, my heart pounding harder. The thought of Mariana and her boss living off my expense was unbearable. The lawyer then concluded, in practice, there's only one way she wouldn't see a dime of it: if she never knows the prize exists. But Ricardo, be very careful. Legally, she could always claim her half. I left the office with the folder under my arm and a rage that I could barely contain. The image of her and her boss laughing at me burned in my mind. Now I knew that if I wasn't careful, she would get her hands on half of my good fortune. No, that wasn't going to happen. Not on my watch. In that instant, I made my decision. I would only go after the prize after the divorce was finalized. And once I had the money in my hands, I would do everything to ensure that no one, especially not Mariana, would ever touch a single cent of it. In the days that followed, Mariana seemed to float. She smiled more, replied to messages in a hurry, and left the house wearing perfume. She believed she had freed herself from a mediocre husband and would soon be living the life she always wanted with her boss. I watched it all in silence, swallowing the bitter taste of betrayal with my morning coffee. I knew what she didn't. There were 12 million in my future. But until the divorce was finalized, any false move could cost me half of it. So, I feigned indifference. I signed papers, answered in monosyllables, and let her believe I was defeated. "You're taking this all too easily," she said one day, her brow furrowed. "It's not like you. Are you hiding something?" I wanted to laugh. Hiding something? Yes. A fortune she would never touch. But I just looked up and said, "After everything you've done, do you really think I owe you any explanation? I'm just closing the door." I saw a flicker of discomfort in her eyes, as if her mask had cracked for a second. But she quickly lifted her chin again, haughty. "Fine. That makes it easier for both of us." She believed she was in control, and I let her. My silence was my trap. The more I stayed quiet, the more certain she was that she was winning. And the more she believed that, the more time I gained to prepare my countermove. There was no rush to expose anything now. The right moment would come, and when it did, it would be final. Little did she know that once the divorce was officially registered, I wouldn't just be a defeated ex-husband, but a millionaire ready to disappear with everything. The day of the signing arrived. We sat at a table at the notary's office, each accompanied by our lawyer. The yellow folder had now become an official agreement. I remained calm, while Mariana wore a victorious smile. For her, this was the end of our story. For me, it was just the opening of the next chapter. The agreement stipulated the sale of the car, with the value split 50-50. I agreed without question. As for the mortgaged apartment, I suggested she keep the property and buy out my share at market value. I wanted no ties to that place. Mariana just nodded, certain she was getting the better deal. The joint account balance was also divided meticulously, down to the last cent. The notary asked if we were in agreement, and I confirmed immediately. Mariana seemed to revel in my coldness, believing I had given up the fight. But in reality, that was exactly what I wanted her to believe. "Then it's settled," said the notary, collecting our signatures. Mariana closed her purse with a triumphant air as if she had just conquered the world. I simply stood up, adjusted my jacket, and said goodbye with a restrained smile. There was no resentment on my face, only a calm that seemed to disconcert her even more. When I walked out of the notary's office, I took a deep breath. I was free. Officially, she had no connection to me other than the past, and that was exactly what I needed to take the next step. While she dreamed of trips with her boss, I already knew my first destination, the bank. With the divorce signed and every cent divided, I was ready to claim the 12 million that would change everything, and to ensure Mariana would never touch a single reel. 2 days after the divorce was finalized, I walked into the bank, my legs trembling. I handed over the winning ticket and all my documents, trying to seem calm. Inside, I felt like everyone was watching me, as if they could somehow guess I was the man holding 12 million at his fingertips. The teller smiled and asked me to wait a moment. The moment turned into half an hour. Then they led me to a private room where a manager appeared with an oily tone. Congratulations on your prize. Now, we need to talk about how to invest this money. That's when I realized the hell was just beginning. He tried to push everything on me: private pensions with absurd fees, savings bonds that were more like a reverse lottery, bank managed funds that any YouTube video would tell you to avoid. As he spoke, I just nodded. I remembered the hours I had spent researching on finance blogs and independent channels. I had learned that the smart path was not to leave a single cent there. The best move was to open an account with a serious investment brokerage, spread the money across various applications, and, in time, send a portion of it abroad. Listening to that manager try to sell me financial traps only reinforced my decision. I signed the necessary paperwork for the release of the funds, but made it clear I didn't want any of their magic packages. The man insisted, looking at me as if I were an ignorant fool wasting the chance of a lifetime. I smiled to myself. If it were up to the bank, I'd be just another millionaire gone broke in a few years, not me. By the end of the afternoon, I received the confirmation slip. The prize would be credited to my account within 2 business days. I left the bank feeling the air was lighter, but my heart was still racing. It was official. The 12 million were on their way. Now, I had to act fast before anyone, especially Mariana, got suspicious. That night, I returned to the apartment only to pack my things. I filled large suitcases with clothes, put my documents in a briefcase, and cleared out everything that was mine. I took one last look at the place where I thought I would spend a lifetime with her. I closed the door without looking back. The next time I walked into a home, it wouldn't be in Brazil. And by the time Mariana discovered I was gone, it would be far too late. 2 days later, the money landed in my account. 12 million. I had never seen so many zeros together. Never imagined I would one day call such a sum my own. The first reaction was euphoria, but reason quickly pulled me back to earth. It was a treasure, and at the same time, a ticking time bomb. If anyone found out, everything could fall apart. I did more research and scheduled a meeting with a respected investment broker. Unlike my bank manager, the consultant was direct. She showed me options, explained the risks, and suggested diversification. With her help, I began opening accounts abroad, scattering the money across assets that wouldn't leave an easy trail for Mariana. As I signed the documents and filled out international forms, my thoughts turned to my parents. My father, already retired, my mother, with her health problems, and my two brothers, who barely spoke to me, busy with their own families. The weight of it all hit me. I was going to disappear, and they would never know the truth. I decided I couldn't drag them into this secret. Telling them would put everyone at risk. A prize like this attracts greed, gossip, even lawsuits. It was better for them to believe I had simply gone abroad to try my luck. The money would be there to help them in an emergency, yes, but its origin would remain a secret. That was the hardest part, accepting that, to them, I would become a ghost. Still, as I signed the final transfer to my new international account, I felt a sense of taking control at last. Mariana could laugh with her boss now, but by the time she discovered I had vanished with everything, it would be far too late. And in that moment, I made my decision. There was no turning back. I would leave Brazil and start over somewhere far away, carrying my secret and a fortune that would never be hers. Once the money began to atomize into accounts and investments abroad, the next step was clear: get out of Brazil. But I couldn't just pack a bag and disappear. I had to put my affairs in order so that if Mariana tried to track me, she would only find erased footprints. I also had to face my job. I had worked for years at a logistics company, a stable salary, but nothing life-changing. I handed in my resignation without ceremony. My boss tried to persuade me to stay, asking if I'd received a better offer. I simply replied that I needed to follow a different path. I worked my last few days and left in silence, like someone closing a door for the very last time. I spent that week tying up loose ends. I canceled my internet, terminated my cell phone plan, and took only what was truly mine: clothes, documents, a few personal items. The furniture, the appliances, everything inside the apartment was left for Mariana. The property had been put in her name during our settlement. With the apartment no longer mine and no outstanding bills, there was nothing left to hold me there. I spent my nights researching flights, comparing destinations. I didn't just want to travel, I wanted to vanish. I chose Lisbon as my first stop, a place where Brazilians blend in easily, and from where I could move on to any corner of Europe. On social media, I began posting generic little photos: an old picture of a beach, a coffee shop downtown, images that looked recent but were years old. I kept everything deliberately vague, as if I were still around, just distracted, with no big plans. To any observer, it would look like simple, mundane life. I packed my bags calmly: clothes, documents, my laptop, a hard drive filled with personal memories. I took only what would fit in the trunk of the taxi that would take me to the airport. I looked at that building one last time. It was no longer mine, and for the first time, that felt liberating. It was like abandoning an entire life, but at the same time, opening a door to something new. The difference was, this time, I would walk through it alone and free. With my ticket bought and the money secured, all that was left was to wait. And it was in this calculated silence that Mariana began to realize something was wrong. After I left the apartment and cut the last of our ties, a strange sense of relief washed over me. I no longer lived where she could reach me, and for the first time, I didn't have to answer to anyone. But the same silence that protected me began to unnerve her. I found out from a mutual friend that she had asked about me, her tone dripping with mockery. Has Ricardo found a place to sleep yet? He's probably on some relative's couch. The friend just laughed and didn't answer. Mariana was convinced I would walk away from this humiliated, but on social media, I was leaving a trail of calculated breadcrumbs, old photos, vague captions, nothing that gave away my real location. To an outsider, it looked like I was just moving on, serene, with no signs of desperation. And that started to plant a seed of doubt in her mind. Her messages became short, direct. Are you okay? Where are you living? Aren't you going to get the rest of your things? I always replied in the same tone. I'm handling it. No clues, nothing more. Each curt response was a reminder that she no longer had any power over me. Later, I heard from an acquaintance at her company that even her boss was starting to find my silence strange. After all, what man accepts losing his marriage and a share of his assets and simply moves on without a fight? That comment made the rounds, and when it got back to me, I realized my silence was doing more damage than any argument ever could. Mariana didn't know it, but that silence was hiding 12 million reais, and the more she insisted on knowing where I was, the more certain I became that her mask was about to slip. My first week outside of Brazil was a mixture of relief and strangeness. Lisbon smelled of strong coffee and was paved with stone streets that seemed to carry centuries of stories. Walking anonymously among the tourists gave me an almost childlike sense of freedom. For the first time in years, no one was pointing at me. No one was making demands. No one was reminding me of my failure. I had rented a small, furnished apartment, paid in euros, directly from my offshore account. It wasn't luxurious, but it was enough. In the mornings, I explored the city. In the afternoons, I read about investments and consulted with my financial advisor. This simple life, without Mariana, was already richer than any promise she had ever made to her boss. Although I was in Lisbon, I was still using WhatsApp with my Brazilian number. I didn't even need an active SIM card, just Wi Fi. And that's how the notification arrived. A name I knew all too well, Mariana. My first instinct was to ignore it, but curiosity won. The message was short. I heard you left your job. I need to talk to you about your severance pay. You know I'm entitled to half. My blood ran cold, not because of the amount, but because of the audacity. She had no idea about the hidden fortune, yet she was already reaching for the few scraps that remained. She added, My lawyer has already spoken to yours. I found out you're not in Brazil anymore. What are you up to, Ricardo? My heart pounded. So they had noticed my absence. My silence was starting to bother them more than any fight ever could. I smiled to myself. She was chasing after pocket change while I was walking the streets of another country. The owner of a fortune her hands would never touch. But the message made one thing clear. Mariana would not give up easily. And the more she tried to pull on that rope, the more she would discover she was only pulling on empty air. I knew, sooner or later, she would realize she had lost far more than just severance pay. It didn't take long for Mariana to change tactics. When she realized my WhatsApp replies were dry and offered no clues, she began to attack on another front, my family. First, she called my mother, feigning concern. He's disappeared. He won't tell me anything. I'm worried. But my mother, simple and firm as always, just replied, that I was fine and didn't want to be contacted. Mariana insisted, tried to cry on the phone, but it didn't work. I had prepared them all beforehand, asking them only to say that I was sorting my life out. Next was my brother's turn. He sent me a screenshot of her messages. Do you know where Ricardo is? He quit his job, sold his things. This isn't normal. My brother, loyal as ever, just replied with a shrugging emoji. Mariana didn't understand that the more she pressed, the more she exposed her own desperation. Even distant friends started telling me, "Man, Mariana is looking for you like crazy." I would just laugh to myself. The network of contacts she was trying to use against me only served to show me that my silence was working. Deep down, I knew it wasn't longing or regret. It was about money. And that desperation was starting to shatter the image of control she had always projected. Soon, her desperation took on an official letterhead. One day, my lawyer messaged me. Mariana's lawyer has been in touch. They want to know about your severance pay and whether you have any undeclared assets. I smiled to myself. Even in this, she seemed a step behind. It was comical. While she was wasting her energy chasing coins, I was calmly walking on millions. Her lawyer kept pushing. He wanted an updated address, wanted account information. Mine, an experienced professional, only gave the bare minimum. He no longer resides in Brazil. He has no fixed address at the moment. We maintain contact by email. Nothing more. Mariana couldn't swallow that calmness. She sent me messages almost daily. Do you think you can just disappear? Do you think you can get rid of me? I would read them and leave them unanswered. With every line she wrote, I felt more certain that the tables had turned. I wasn't the one who needed to run anymore. She was. Her legal siege was going nowhere. With each frustrated attempt, she became more exposed, more desperate, more ridiculous. And I just watched from a distance, in silence, living a life she would never touch. But I knew that sooner or later, Mariana wouldn't be content with lawyers. She would come for me herself, and that would be her biggest mistake. A few days after her last volley of messages, I received another one. Ricardo, I'm in Europe with Roberto. I thought maybe we could talk. I know you're over here too. I almost laughed out loud. She had crossed the ocean with her lover and still thought I owed her a meeting. My first impulse was to ignore her, but then I had a thought. Maybe this was the perfect chance to show her, face to face, exactly what she had lost. I replied calmly, pick a place. We can meet in Seville. I'll come to you. It was close enough to be convenient, yet far enough to leave her without any control. When I arrived at the restaurant, Mariana was there alone. Her lover had probably made some excuse. She stood up, nervous, trying to smile. Ricardo, thank you for coming. I needed to talk to you. I sat down in silence, letting the weight of the moment fall upon her. She took a deep breath. Look, I know things ended badly, but we spent years together. I made a mistake. I want to believe there's still room for a conversation. You just fell off the map. That's not fair. I leaned forward and let the words drop with precision. Mariana, on the same day you asked me for a divorce, I won the lottery. 12 million reais. Her face crumbled, as if every muscle had lost its strength. You're joking, she stammered. I'm not. It's all outside of Brazil now. Invested, protected. And you know the best part? You will never see a single cent of it. She brought her hands to her face, lost, trying to salvage some shred of dignity. I stood up, tossed a few bills on the table to cover the check, and delivered my final sentence. You made your choice, Mariana. Crawl all you want, but that money will never be yours. Enjoy your trip with Roberto. You're going to need him because you'll never get anything from me again. I walked out of that restaurant with a feeling of absolute victory, but also with a certainty. Mariana wouldn't stop there, and each new attempt would only serve to prove how she had condemned herself with her own hands. The next day, I woke up to a phone full of notifications. Mariana. Long, desperate, breathless messages. Ricardo, I made a mistake. Please, don't leave me like this. You don't understand. I was confused. I was pressured. I didn't know what I was doing. I scanned each line as if reading a poorly written script. The woman who had called me mediocre was now begging for my attention. We can start over. We can be partners. I don't need Roberto. I need you. The words tasted of desperation, not love. So I didn't reply. I just waited. Hours later, another flood of messages. Think of everything we built. Don't throw away all our years together. I didn't know about the lottery. If I had known, I would have stayed. I laughed to myself. Finally, she had said it out loud. The truth that had always been behind her every move. Money. In the days that followed, the messages swung between pleas and attacks. One moment it was, Ricardo, I love you. Don't do this to me. The next, you're cruel, you're selfish. You'll never be happy alone. That money will destroy you. I just read them in silence, each word confirming that I had made the right choice. With every ignored message, Mariana sank deeper. This wasn't repentance. It was the fear of facing a life with no husband, no lover, and no money. And as she groveled, begging for a piece of what no longer belonged to her, I felt only one thing with absolute certainty. I would never go back, not for a second. Little did she know, the more she humbled herself, the more I fortified my silence. It was the one weapon that would leave her utterly alone in the end. When my replies never came, Mariana resorted to threats. A long, rambling email, filled with accusations, landed in my inbox on a rainy morning. Ricardo, you can't just abandon me like this. I'll tell everyone you fled Brazil to hide money. I can even file an international lawsuit. Do you really think you'll get away with it? I read those lines and smiled. Her desperation was so palpable, it was almost pitiful. Almost. If she had so much as an address, a single shred of proof, perhaps she could have been a nuisance, but she had nothing. Just screams into the void, trying to scratch me from a distance. Days later, a mutual friend sent me a message. Dude, Mariana is spreading rumors that you ran off with dirty money, that you're in hiding because you're into something illegal. I laughed to myself again. Anyone who knew me knew I had nothing to hide. Anyone who believed her only confirmed the ridiculous person she had become. The climax of her desperation came when she tried to video call me on WhatsApp. I answered out of pure curiosity. On the other side of the screen was Mariana, her face gaunt, makeup smeared, her voice trembling. Ricardo, please, I'll do anything. Just don't leave me with nothing. I'll crawl, I'll beg. I took a deep breath and spoke for the first time in weeks. Mariana, you've already lost. There's no point in screaming, crying, or making things up. You chose this path. Now you live with it. I am never coming back. Ever. And I ended the call before she could answer. That call was the last time I ever heard her voice. And in that instant, I knew. The cycle was closed. All that was left was to write the final sentence of our story. Today, looking back, I see that I lost nothing. What I had with Mariana wasn't love, it was dependency. I was a stepping stone, nothing more. When she thought she'd found someone better, she jumped without a second glance. She just didn't count on the fact that, in making that leap, she would let go of the only safety net she ever had. Roberto, the great savior who had promised her trips and stability, was the first to bail the moment he realized just how desperate she had become. He didn't want to share problems. He only wanted fun. He left her alone in the middle of a trip, discarding her like something that had lost its charm. And fate, in its own way, was just. She ended up with no husband, no lover, no job, and no future. Meanwhile, I am living the life I always dreamed of. Free, distant, unchained, building a path that is entirely my own. I don't need to prove anything to anyone anymore, least of all to her. Sometimes, people ask if I wasn't too cruel, but then I remember her words. I've wasted too much time on a mediocre man like you, and I know I wasn't cruel. I simply returned her truth with my own. If there's a lesson in this story, it's a simple one. Some people only reveal their true colors when money enters the picture. And when that happens, you either let yourself be destroyed or you learn to destroy the illusion. It's funny. Mariana thought she was playing chess, meticulously planning her moves. But in the end, she sacrificed her king for a pawn, trading stability and years of marriage for empty promises and losing 12 million over a boss who bailed at the first sign of turbulence. That's the perfect definition of what I'd call premium grade bad luck. If there were a world championship for bad choices, she'd come home with the gold medal, all because she couldn't contain her own arrogance. So, tell me, would you have the courage to disappear and start over from scratch like Ricardo did? Or would you have run back, trying to salvage something that was broken beyond repair? Let me know your thoughts in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. And of course, be sure to subscribe to the channel to become part of our family. Anyone who loves stories of betrayal, revenge, and destinies turned upside down won't want to miss the next video. Until next time.